Hello there, thanks for joining me today. In this video I'm going to be continuing to work on a very large fantasy landscape painting. I'm going to be working with acrylic paints on Strathmore multimedia paper, and I'm adding a couple of really cool tiki statues to the painting. I'll talk you through the whole process, so I hope you'll stick around and I hope you enjoy the video. So before I add the tikis, I want to finish some work on this mountain character that I have started here. I did another video on this character, and I painted this with Paynes Grey and white. To finish it up, I'm going to be doing some glazing with green gold, burnt umber, raw umber, and a little bit of white to just add some depth and interest to the character. Yeah, feel free to pause the video if you want to get a longer look at this at these paint swatches. So I've been experimenting quite a lot with this technique recently, and I really love the effects you can get. It's pretty straightforward. I'm using golden acrylic glazing liquid, and I'm mixing it with golden fluid acrylics. And so like the green gold and several other colors that I have are very, very transparent paints. So the glazing liquid sort of enhances that and makes it even thinner. Essentially all I'm doing is just experimenting with the mixture of the glazing medium and the paints and just layering them on top of each other. And acrylic, of course, dries really fast, so you can just start covering up what you've done before, and honestly, the more you do, the more interesting it gets. Once I get a pretty decent amount of the color down, then I'm going back with raw umber and burnt umber and white and just adding more cracks and highlights and just building up the textures. Alright, so moving on to these tiki statues. I want these statues to be over sort of a teal background or something that will serve as a base for maybe some jungle textures and different varieties of plants and stuff that I'm going to add in later. So I just want to lay down and block in a big area, not being too careful with how I'm painting, just dropping in some various teals and blues and greens just to have a nice background to paint on top of. So here I have a drawing that I scanned into the computer, tiled and printed and stitched together, and I'm using it to transfer my drawing to the painting surface using white Saral tracing paper. This whole process basically is one that I use often just because it saves a ton of time, gets the drawings transferred very accurately, and sometimes I like to just freehand draw things without using this method, but it absolutely is something that I go to and use often. Another material I've been using a lot lately is matte medium, and here I'm going to use matte medium to seal in the white line work of the Saral paper. You have to be careful at this step if you don't use like a spray fixative or something to lock the drawing lines in place first, but if you're careful, you can put on a thin layer of this and lock everything into place, and it won't smear and smudge and erase too much. I ended up drawing over these lines again with a paint pen anyway, so that's another thing I might consider doing in the future, is just using an acrylic paint pen to paint over them. I paint with sticks, I paint with paper towels, all kinds of things, but I occasionally do invest in really nice brushes, and as you may have heard in other videos of mine, I'm a big fan of Greg Simkins, and so Greg Simkins came out with a new brush set, and often his older brush sets seem to be sold out and hard to find, and so I jumped on the opportunity. Being October and Halloween themed, the stars seem to have aligned for me to just to make this purchase. And I will say I'm really enjoying these brushes. They're really nice, and especially for small detail work in acrylic paint, they work really well, and you definitely have to take care of them. And so these are brushes that I hope will last me a good long time, and highly recommend them. So this might be a good time for you to pause the video if you're interested in the color palette and just take a long look at these colors that are on the screen here, because I'm going to be using these colors pretty much for the rest of the video, and I always struggle a little bit trying to anticipate what the best way is to edit these videos and to share the process. I want this to be as straightforward and as step-by-step as it can be, but frankly, my process often isn't like that. From this point on, I'll try to interrupt and call out key moments that make sense, but there's a lot of times where I'm just taking various mixes of these colors and trying to, frankly, paint tikis until they look good. So, I'm using the yellow ochre and the burnt umber as a base. I'm using the raw umber for the deepest, darkest shadows. I'm using Quinacridone Nickel Gold transparently with glazes, the same for Alizarin Crimson, and obviously using white and yellow ochre for highlights, and just taking my time doing different passes over, just reacting to what I'm putting down. So I'll put down a mid-tone, and then I'll put down a dark area, and then I'll come back with a highlight, and I'll just repeat that process over and over again until it feels like it's starting to take shape and look like something exciting. So having said all that, here I am using raw umber, and I actually do think I might have mixed in a little bit of carbon black as well. Not much, maybe just a little bit, because I wanted these deep, dark crevices to just feel like almost like they were going back into infinity, right? And I think that I knew that a lot of this would come together as far as the overall tones. I'm going to be doing some glazing over the whole thing later anyway, but these dark crevices really start to give this thing some depth, and just give it a real sense of depth and really start to pull it together. Okay, so here I'm going back and starting to add in more highlights now that I've got some of these darker areas finished, and hopefully you can see in the video I'm using a very thin brush to also add in some wood grain and texture using burnt umber and raw sienna, just alternating using glazes, using highlights, doing some wood grain, just back and forth with those techniques over and over and over again until it starts to look really good to me. I'm really excited actually about where it's going at this point. I feel like it's really starting to feel vibrant and pop off the background and have a little bit of a look that I was imagining, sort of in my mind, envisioning when I started this whole thing. I want to talk a little bit about the whole tiki idea and where it came from. So I essentially had this bluejay that I wanted to put in this painting from the beginning. I wanted to do a really big bluejay, which partially was just because I'd never really painted a bluejay before, and I'm excited to try and continue to get better at painting realistic birds. I love this idea of fantasy scenes and like mixing nature and different symbolism and strange surrealist imagery, and I just needed something for the bird to sit on, and I didn't want it to be just a tree. So I could have gone with a tree. I had some other sketches, and I think that I would have obviously played with that concept and tried to do something special or interesting with the bark or with the limbs, or found some way to make it just not a regular old tree. I didn't take much thought to come up with this idea of having the bluejay sit on a tiki statue, because I just love tiki statues in general. There's just something interesting about and sort of magical about this idea that these spirits maybe are embodied in these objects. So thinking ahead here, if you may have noticed that the bottom tiki is holding a stick in its mouth, and I'm going to put some flames on the ends of those, or at least on the one that's out in the middle of the painting. And I'm starting to think through, speaking of magic, do I want to make the fire, the flames on that torch a really otherworldly color? Do I want to make it like a green, fluorescent green, or like a pink, or sort of a mixture of like purple and pink, or what? And I'm already starting to get a little bit protective of the tiki statue that I put in, because obviously if I add in a flame that's a really bright color, I'm gonna probably want to tint some of the highlights and some of the different areas of the tiki with that color. So it's this balance of making progress and enjoying what you're doing, having fun, but then also trying not to get too precious with the work, because I think that to really get to the level I want to get to as a painter, I have to be willing to take risks and take chances. And but I'm wrestling with that idea already as I'm making progress here. I do want to say that I do think that the bluejay feathers are really going to pop and look nice over the wood here. I think those color contrasts are going to work really well together. So I'm kind of excited. I'm thinking about what that's going to be like. So after I've made a pretty decent pass here of dropping these guys in, I let it dry and then I cover it again with matte medium. And this is a little bit stressful because it actually dulls down the paint and it pushes back the color a little bit, but it's a necessary step because I'm going to end up toning it again, and I want to sort of lock everything in place before I do that. I did want to mention that at one point the paint started to buckle the paper quite a lot, and so I took the painting down and painted the back of it using a mixture of paint and gesso, which helps sort of reverse that effect and even everything out and bring it back into a flatter surface to work on. Jumping ahead here, I don't think I had a video footage, but I actually glazed over the entire thing again with a mixture of Quinacridone Nickel Gold and also Alizarin Crimson. So just a thin layer of that. And then after that, I started to go back and actually add in sort of the hottest highlights again. Here's a little sneak peek. I did start adding in the jungle a little bit, just very loose, very abstract, just having fun. Yeah, we'll see how this one turns out. I'm pretty excited about where it's going. I don't know when the next time I'll be able to upload a video on this specific piece is, because I have a lot of other commissions that I also need to finish up before the end of the year. Let me know what you all think. I really appreciate your time and spending time with me here, and hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Peace.